Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to HMP. My name is Adam Portress, and I hope you're ready to get bit because today we're covering The Howling, and I'm joined by the president of the D. Wallace fan club, Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
I don't know how you knew that, but it's true.
And it's his month, and will we be singing his praises or howling at the moon in disgust? Here's Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and I learned martial arts from an app, Adam.
That's what I've heard. That's the word on the streets. I don't know if you've been on the streets, but that's what I have heard, is that you learned martial arts from an app, and we best not get in your way lest we want to be karate chopped or something along those lines. Today we're talking about The Howling because Bruce has decided, actually I'd take that back. The people over at patreon.com/HMP have voted for what we watch in this spooky month of October, and you have chosen Once Bitten, so we are going to cover all werewolf movies. And Bruce, you are the captain of the werewolf ship, and tell us about today's offering.
Well, first thing I want to say is next year we should consider doing a whole quarter instead of just a month. And let me just go ahead and do 12 weeks. Would that be okay for next year?
12 weeks of werewolves.
I think a month is perfect.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to just the right amount.
The Howling is one of the first maybe 2 to 3 werewolf movies I ever remember people talking about. I mean, people talked about werewolves, like cartoonish or classic monster movie. Just the idea of a werewolf is always kind of cool. You got Fang Face and it show up on Scooby-Doo, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as far as like when people first started talking about werewolf movies, The Howling was one of those. And it seemed like The Howling was the one that the kids who like scary movies liked the most. And what I've kind of come to sort of think about later is The Howling, to me, now I don't know the chronology of when some of these movies were actually released, so we will have to go look into it. But what I do know is that it feels like to me that The Howling is when the werewolf movie was redefined so that it would kind of be, I don't know what you call it, blended in well with a slasher audience. So it's kind of updating the werewolf movie for a slasher audience is kind of what I think about The Howling here, and that's why I thought it would be a good one to start this month off with. The first modern werewolf movie.
Mm-hmm.
Can I bust in?
Sure.
Yeah, please do.
Everything you said is correct. I watched, as I said to you guys off air, I watched the documentary on the making of this movie this week. And one of the things that Joe Dante was talking about is that they on purpose made it seem like it was a slasher movie, not a werewolf movie, with the marketing, because they knew that slasher movies were what kids were going to see, not werewolf movies. So they kind of, the marketing team in coordination with the production team, because the production team, when you look at the pacing of this movie is not paced like a werewolf movie, it's paced like a slasher. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what they were going for all along. And the other part too was that there was something, it is the first instance of like redefining what a werewolf is, because the last time that werewolf movies were being made was like in the 60s. And so there was a little bit of dust on them ideas. And so they were like, hey, it's time to come back to werewolves, because no one's done a good one, like a modern one, and modern meaning 1981. No one's made a good modern werewolf movie.
And we got a lot of guys who are really starting to jump up the special effects makeup levels in a big bad way around this time.
Right. I mean, they get Savini to do the special effects.
Well, we're going to mention a couple of names, because was it Savini? I thought that they started with Rick Baker.
They wanted Rick Baker, but they thought they could get Rick Baker, but at the last minute, because The Howling and
so different places you get different information, but the information that I got was probably from like the last drive-in conversation. So I don't know that that's a citation as good as the documentary that you watched, but it did sound like Rick Baker started on this job, and then when he got the chance to go to American Werewolf in London, he left, but he had already kind of left behind the design on the transformation. And I kind of want to save that for when we talk about the transformation. So maybe we'll clarify this point then.
Okay.
And we'll go ahead and roll into this. Do you have a list, Adam?
No, we got other things to cover. You stop it. I'm running the show.
Yeah, and also let me finish my comment. You're just rolling into shit.
Bring it back up.
My God, man. So like the my God. So like the Rick Baker was supposed to be on this, and we'll talk about that later. I understand that you want to talk about that later, but this is really Savini's show. This is his first job by himself, really. Adam, please continue.
Before we get into all the nitty-gritty details of the Howling, as I'm sure everybody is waiting with bated breath now, we do want to say a giant thank you to the people that helped make this Howling episode and all of this all of these spooky episodes with werewolves possible. By supporting us over at patreon.com/HMP. When you're there, you get the pre-show, post-show, Dinger Zone, vote on what we watch, and help keep this show afloat, man. We really appreciate all of you guys month after month. However you feel like this show is worth, put in a $1 form, send it our way, get extra stuff in the same time. And just know that you're helping independent podcasts who don't have, crappy ads that you don't want to listen to for things that you're just not going to buy. So give us the $1 as opposed to McDonald's or something like that. That's what I'm saying. And if you can't do that, for the love of Pete, just go over to the iTunes there and give us a 5-star review, a.k.a. a humdinger.
Humdinger.
It's been a hot minute, but we got a new one, boys. This one comes to us from someone named, let me look at this, Killard Chi. It's entitled, I Like It, 5 stars, and it reads as follows. I like it. Well, thanks, Killer G.
Perfect.
As long as it is there, there's 5 stars and some words accompanying it. As far as I'm concerned, that's a humdinger.
Perfection.
So if you would like to help us out over there, go leave us a review on iTunes. If you've already done that, you know the rules. Pick up your grandma's phone, go to the iTunes, go review it. Just go review it. You know she's doing it. And if she's not done it, I mean, if she has done it already, guess what? High five your grandma because she's awesome. All right, here's the IMDb plotline for The Howling. As we know, IMDb always 100% correct in everything they say and or do. After a bizarre and near-deadly encounter with a serial killer, a television newswoman is sent to a remote mountain resort whose residents may not be what they seem. This is written by Gary Brander, John Sayles, Terrence H. Winkless, directed by the Joe Dante. And let me sell everybody on this low budget, this bad boy. It's not that low budget, but it's low budget for the time, really. But this sucker's got everything. We got E.T.'s mom, David Carradine's dad, the doctor from Star Trek Voyager, dime store James Woods. It's a Joe Dante flick, so you know we got a Roger Corman and Dick Miller cameos. Slim Pickens, and that's just the rest of the cast. I'll see myself out. It's 3:47 in the a.m. and you're watching Perspectives, but no Lionel Osborne. Very disappointing. Shrink talk, fairly accurate newsroom representation, phone boost, cop talk, lip licking, dirty bookstore, but it isn't in what did I even write there? Anyways, smiley faces. I bet Bruce thinks this is Watchmen related. Snuff films on actual film. Memory loss, bad dreams. Fellas, don't you hate it when your lady gets assaulted and then you just want her to make it with you? We got Mole Richardson representing. Send him up to the nut camp. Craven the Hunter, sleeping in your makeup. Morgue humor, group therapy. 38 minutes in, the first mention of a werewolf and Dick Miller. You win on all counts. Finally, in the 42-minute, we finally get what we assume is a werewolf. Exposition TV, making it with a lady who ain't your lady. Speaking of which, you ever get into it so much that both of you become werewolves? Who hasn't had that one happen? We got a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, light cabin, hatchet jobs, backhand smacking, mind ripping, skull bulging, chest bursting, clothes ripping, acid tossing, high-priced Mazdas, one of us, werewolf town meeting, a fun with a 22, firehouse that appears on screen 3 years before they actually formed. Pretty impressive if you think about it. Smashing a cop car, a special news report, house galore. This movie's got everything.
Wow, what was that about Firehouse?
Yeah, well, the house is on fire, and it's funny, when I saw that, I was just like, oh, Firehouse, like the band that my cousin got married to, and that was like his wedding song, and I kind of laughed at it, even at the time, which was like the early 90s, which was still like, I don't know why you should be playing this. Then I knew it was bad, but I was like, Firehouse, let me see when Firehouse formed, and it formed 3 years after this movie, so I like to think that the guys in Firehouse were watching The Howling and going, bro, we got
an argument online circa 1992 to 93 where somebody was talking about how hard Firehouse was, and I was like, Firehouse is weak. And after a bit of arguing, I realized he'd been typing fire hose and I was typing firehouse. So we were indeed both correct.
Awful.
That's the first time and last time that ever happened on the internet.
Yes.
All right, so Bruce, this is your baby. Let's launch us off into the Howling world.
Oh, I'm sorry. His son just walked in. Give me vamp.
So I was one of those people. I didn't see the Howling until super late, like I previously kind of mentioned and stuff. I had not even seen American Werewolf in London till I was like 20, maybe.
This is around that same time because you and I have a similar experience where, like, when you're in your early 20s and you like movies, you're so
sorry, guys.
Let's get it. It's the kind of thing where it's like, we'll get into the horror genre because I was a sucky baby as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
Me too. I think we all three can say that we were latecomers to horror. Love to talk about it and close my eyes and put my fingers in my ears when the movies were on.
I couldn't take people talking about, like, people would have like the power went out at the daycare once and they were all talking about the Freddy and Jason movies and stuff. Just based on them talking about them, I was frightened to death.
I think I've seen this movie about 3 times. And I still get confused in the beginning. In fact, I feel a little bit more confident now that I know what was going on, but these notes are going to carry my confusion. So if they seem a little bit wrong in the beginning, I promise you that I do correct it as we go along. Have some patience with me, please.
All right.
But the first thing I remember thinking, and I had totally forgotten this, but right off the bat, we see Dee Wallace doing some kind of creepy undercover mission. And there's some people listening in who I assume must be police detectives, because why the heck else are you trying to catch a raping, murdering serial killer other than like working with the police?
No.
And then right at the beginning of the movie, the doofus head police guy with the earphones takes his cans off, looks up at the camera and goes, "Oh, they always get shorted out by neon," which makes me think if somebody's going to be meeting the killer in Times Square, you may want to use a communication method that can't be foiled by neon. Now, I later found out this wasn't Times Square, but you will imagine my surprise because, yeah, that seems like she's in Times Square with no context, especially like living in this era, which is 40 years later. Would you guys have thought, oh, that's definitely Skid Row, LA?
I don't think, not right off the top. And that was one of the things that, like, because I had seen this movie years ago, but we'll talk about it in subsequent episodes, but I kind of considered it a lesser than, so I think I've only ever seen it the one time. And so I really remembered next to nothing about this movie. So yeah, I kind of thought it was like, oh, is this a New York thing? I couldn't quite remember, but you quickly go, no, we are definitely in LA.
Do you guys think the police are involved in this in any way? Because I honestly don't know. I think they are, but I'm not sure.
It's 50-50, like 81 Joe Dante. It's like he may, like, again, he's also one of those guys that comes from that old school corpsman thing to where he might not have gotten any permits for that. But at the same time, too, where he's big enough at this point, because he's like, if he hasn't, when's Gremlins? Is that 82, 3, something like that?
84.
Like 84.
Okay, yeah. So he's about, like he's starting to get some cachet here.
I don't know. To answer your question, I read it as that the police are there, but once the uniform guys show up, I'm completely baffled on whether or not there was ever any police involved.
Yeah. And it's like I'm sitting here watching, and first off, I start thinking, is NYC, like, did New York City used to be filthy with Southerners? Because I'm looking at the cast when it's coming on, and I'm hearing like Mustache Man looks very much like he should be from a Walking Tall movie. And then the weatherman is in there doing his weatherman voice, and he gets startled and he sounds like Foghorn Leghorn for a minute, like it's kind of a gag. Then he goes back to his TV voice. And then later on, when I realized it's LA, that all makes sense, because LA is all people that left their small town to be famous, whereas New York is like, you don't come here. We got enough people already, So then it all started to like make a little bit more sense when I realized it was LA. But I'm sitting here in the beginning trying to think what a wonderful world it is when the police, a weatherman, and the undercover local celebrity's husband all hang out together in a room. Like this, if it's police related, I don't know, you want the husband around, but if it's work related, like, I've never worked in the news business, but Adam, I think you have.
Yep.
Was it common for spouses with absolutely no connection to the newsroom to just be chilling?
No. Now there were a couple people that were like there were some marriages and stuff that like more interdepartmental kind of thing. Somebody like over in another side of the building in sales versus, editorial or something like that. So, but there was no one's buddies ever came and hung out, especially any weird spouses or anything else like that. This guy in his amazing sweater just hanging around all the time. Boy, I would imagine that guy would be quite hated around the newsroom if that dude was to exist.
Did either of you guys ever watch The Deuce when it was on HBO?
No.
James Franco played twin brothers.
Mm-mm.
It's set in Times Square, like during the 70s and stuff. And when she goes into that skeezy whack-a-mole hut, it seemed just like the way that they depicted the shops on Times Square in that. So this being from 1981, wasn't it? And that's like basically the 70s still. It takes about 5 years for a decade to start and stop.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Well, anyway, I'm just glad that those kind of shops, to the best of my knowledge, don't exist anymore. Like, man, I'm glad that you don't walk down the sidewalk and you know what's going on just behind a pane of glass.
Well, they're not nearly as many of them.
You think they still exist for real, though? I mean, we're in the internet era.
I know there's one whenever I'm making the drive down through, I believe, South Carolina. There is a billboard that you always see for like giant adult bookstore. And like, there's always part of you that wants to go, should I just see just for fun? Exactly. Not. You're right. Because, smarter heads prevail, but there's always a lingering thing of like,
that 13-year-old boy inside you
that just goes like, because like I've only ever been to like one like really scuzzy one of those things like way back in the day. It was on Wilkinson Boulevard, if that tells you anything. So it was rough.
So guys, it was E.T., right? Like E.T. is the reason that we kind of know who Dee Wallace is. Like people, especially mine and Sean's age, probably had some kind of crush type thing on Dee Wallace.
Crush, no, because
she was good looking though.
She's Elliot's mom. I mean, nowadays I'm like, wow, she's gorgeous. Yeah. But when I saw E.T., she was Elliot's mom.
I'll tell you what got me. Now, do you remember the scene in E.T. when she's in like this kind of silky nightgown thing and she bends over to get in the refrigerator?
Yep.
And she like bends at the waist and her rump is out, and one of Elliot's older brother's friends acts like he's going to put his finger in her butt while the other kids are laughing. That was my awakening as a child, I think.
He goes, oh, and then when E.T. came out, it all just made sense.
that's why I have the strangest relationships now.
But yeah, she is one of those. Take off after this, man.
There's a couple of things here. So like Dee Wallace is one of those actresses where it seems like she's in literally everything in the 70s and 80s, but she's not really. She's in Cujo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
E.T. and there's one more, and it's like really she's in this.
In the Howling, of course, the most popular of those.
Well, the Howling, but there's one more that's like you're like, wow, she's in this, really? Like it's kind of like it's
not like the Dirt Bike Kid or something like that, is it? One of those.
It's sort of. I'm gonna have to look it up, but the thing that I know about Dee Wallace watching the documentary is that they did not have cast her husband in the movie. Is it her husband?
Critters, maybe what you're thinking.
Critters, that's what it is. Thank you.
Oh, cool.
But in the Howling, it's her, like the character with the who can wear the hell out of a sweater and has the mustache. That guy, is that her boyfriend or her husband?
That's her husband.
It's her husband.
Yeah.
Okay. So they did not have her husband cast. And so she knows this. So she says to her live-in boyfriend, hey, they're trying to cast my husband in this movie. I think you'd be perfect for it. We already have the chemistry. Like it's already built in.
Your mustache is already there.
Exactly. So she tells him, don't let them know that we're together, because you will definitely not get the gig if they know that.
I did not know they were together in real life.
Yes. I mean, eventually no, but like, during the making of the Howling, they were.
They did a couple of movies together, if memory serves.
So he auditions, gets the part, and then they call him to let him know he has the part. and D answers the phone.
Whoops.
And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were trying to call the guy playing your husband. I think I got the wrong number. She's like, no, he's here. And the producers were like, really? So like already they're kind of mad at her.
A little late though in the game, you know.
A little late.
My car broke down out front. I just came in to use the phone. But we do figure out this is LA because we see like the headlines about the serial killer. And it says all over LA, and LA is in a panic, and LA Skid Row is in a panic. And it is kind of a clue because they go to this really like rundown tenement that makes me think of like where that original Basket Case, a real Frankenenlader East Coast dirty looking place on the inside, but the outside looks like it's on the Hamptons. And I honestly started because I'm still thinking New York City. And then they go to this tenement thing that looks like a palace at the Hamptons. And I'm like Googling to see if the Hamptons used to be broke like in the 80s, but they weren't. I think they were always rich up there. But
yeah, that is one heck of a location because it's confusing because it's really cool looking, but it's also it's like it's like a castle or something, or maybe like an old prison that's become a tenement. Like it's really bizarre to look at. It's neat to see, but it's just more confusion on confusion for the opening of this movie.
Now, I think Connie Chung, did she come up through LA local news?
I think so.
Because, you know, this is a Hollywood production. They're filming it in LA. And there's this running gag about, to use the words in the, well, no, I won't use the words in the movie. There's a running gag about an Asian news reporter.
Go ahead.
There's a running gag about an Asian news reporter. And I think this has to be because Connie Chung's like, what? A person who's not white or maybe sort of black is on the news? You know, they just couldn't even grasp the concept of that in 1981.
Yeah, that was just like what?
I remember like my 7th grade English teacher saying, you know, Connie Chung can crack walnuts with their toes. What kind of journalist do you think that is? And I'm like, what's one got to do with the other? And also, how do you know this? Like, is there a secret place where people talk about toe cracking nuts? I don't know.
Where can I see Connie Chung cracking walnuts with
that sounds like, is that on YouTube?
That's how we know Maury Povich is not the father. But anyway, can you believe that old news director, Adam, he preferred the old white guy over the young women?
Now that's a man that can actually read a teleprompter.
That's what you call a professional. He drinks his booze 8 times a day.
This whole newsroom is great. It is they clearly shot at a news studio. Mm-hmm. I would almost bet that they use the actual crew and stuff because I'm watching the way that like people are actually moving and stuff, and they are moving appropriately. Like the guy that's floor managing out there for the show, him pointing from, you know, like camera 1 over to camera 2, just watching that little thing in there. I'm like, you don't know to do that unless you've done that.
So is that Dennis Dugan who's the floor manager?
No. So when I say floor manager, so he was probably the technical director.
You mean the guy out on the floor?
Yeah, the guy out on the floor that's actually just, you know, showing you like, okay, you're at camera 1, you're going over to camera 2. And that move where he just like goes over and points from like the left to the right, going over to that second camera, I saw that a billion times.
That's how that works in real life, huh? I didn't realize there was a guy literally on the floor.
Well, not so much these days. Maybe it's been a minute since I've actually kind of sat in on one, but yeah, it's usually they kind of have, at least where I was, they had like a little seat that was like right on the floor and stuff, and they could kind of like zoom around and everything with that, but like they'd be low on the floor and just kind of pointing you like they're hearing the technical director go, or the director going, 1 to 2, get ready to, and then
I see. So that's what, because I was trying to figure out what Dennis Dugan does for the news. For the news broadcast. So he's the director.
I think he's a news director. I believe that was probably his role there.
Okay.
That's what I called him, but I don't know. I just kind of guessed.
But
so yeah, I've been to a therapist, guys. Like, you know, I've been to a therapy before. Have either of you ever been to a therapist?
Oh yeah.
I went once when I was a child, and then we realized, like, it was like maybe middle school or something. We learned, it was only one time, but we learned a lot of things of like, because I was bigger than teachers, I didn't respect ones that were smaller than me. So I didn't really, Ones that,
You do Gorilla Monsoon shop class for the rest of your life.
well, so I had I had tall parents and stuff. So like I listened to the tall people. I respected the taller people. The shorter people, for whatever reason, as a child, I was just like, I don't have to listen to what you say. I'm bigger than you. So I didn't.
Oh, wow. Sometimes therapy can be simple. Sometimes
Adam Big, Adam Smash.
I was just like, no,
Now,
I don't
guys,
want it.
between the three of us, have any of us ever had a therapist want us to go camping?
No.
I did
What
love
would
that.
you do if your psychiatrist said, "Hey, you know what? Let's go camping with a bunch of my friends at the colony." Like, which is better, if they're all his patients or if none of them are his patients? I think it's equally creepy either way.
Yeah, anytime that they just go like, well, we have a special retreat for you and a lot of people that are just like you. You're like, no.
Just like me.
You know, in a remake of The Howling, this would all be multi-level marketing and not psychotherapy.
Oh, dude, that's not a bad idea, actually. You multi-level marketing, and then they're just, what we're really trying to do is make everybody werewolves. That's awesome.
That is pretty good. That's a pretty good idea.
I don't have any copyrights.
Mail this podcast to yourself. Isn't that how it works?
I'm going to do it as we speak. I'm emailing it. So, did you guys have any suspicions about this colony when we first arrived? We got an old guy who seems to be worried about his teeth, and then we see this sexy lady dressed like a fortune teller. Something tells me this is not like any camping trip I've ever been
It's
on.
a ragtag group, to be sure. Everyone is all over the map, and then John Carrady's trying to kill himself in fire. And you're like,
So I want
what's
to ask you
happening?
about John Carradine. Is he the father of the more well-known Carradines to me?
Mhm.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a father or what, because sometimes I'm like, so that's their father. I'm like, no, it's his younger brother. He lived a rough life.
No, well, they all live pretty rough lives for the most part, but
yeah, fair to say.
Yeah, the old man there was like, I mean, all the way back in like Stagecoach and everything in the 30s. So like that is a legacy family right there.
And then we see Marcia. Marcia's the name of the sexy fortune teller, because when a movie's got a sexy fortune teller in it, it's worth paying attention to the name.
Aren't the fortune tellers either like sexy or absolutely disgusting? There's nothing in the
they
middle.
look like a witch, or they look like the hot girl who works at the head shop.
Mhm.
Nobody captured it more perfectly than Kevin Smith and Mallrats. But back to Marcia here, because Marcia and Mr. Feeney are arguing over some kind of a book. And the thing is, this book looks like it kind of looks like one of those books that your mom had in 1986 with like that white dust jacket. It might be an Irma Bombeck book or something. It does not look at all occult. And I start thinking, like, you know what? As Mr. Feeney and Marcia are arguing, and they're not just arguing, they're like soap opera arguing here. And this is a little bit of a throwback, in my opinion, to more like Hammer horror or even Universal horror type interaction, where instead of horror, we're getting thrown back into gothic melodrama here.
Which, you know, Dante is a fan of all of that old school horror stuff. So I would not be shocked of him just pulling from any and everywhere.
And
that guy.
I've got this weird knee jerk reaction because I was young when I discovered Joe Dante. I keep assuming he's like close to my age, which is stupid. You know, like there's no way in heck, but sometimes I forget that he is actually old enough that is not even him trying to do something to him. That's just how horror is.
I used to, I don't do it anymore, but I kept misremembering Joe Dante and Joe Johnston for some reason.
Okay.
I think because they're both from Spielberg's camp, and they're both, named Joe.
Yeah.
And they both made movies around the same time. They started around the same time. So I just constantly messed up who did what.
Pretty popular, crowd-pleasing things, but like were never like the name that Spielberg was recognizability-wise,
Right. They just know how to shoot a movie.
Yeah, he's like Dante is a workhorse director, just a guy that that is going to put in a solid thing, usually come in under budget and everything. And he's one of those dudes.
Yeah, and I'm watching this movie, and immediately John Carradine I've decided is like my surrogate until I realize there's a better option, and then I realize there's yet a better option. So this movie just gives me the old Bruce acting, like it comes through in triplicate in this one.
Well, that's
starting
another
with John Carradine, and it keeps going.
That's another huge Joe Dante thing. Is like when you look at the cast of this film, this is him going in and getting these character actors of old and stuff that he's seen in other things, and people that he loves that he knows he can get for cheap. Yeah,
Well, I'll wait a minute before I talk again about the Corman connection. But yeah, there's some casting here that to me is 100% Corman connection.
That is Corman outside of the phone booth.
Phone booth, yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh. It's great.
Well, that is my connection, I guess. I didn't know that was Corman, so that's way better than the one I had.
Oh yeah, no, he's in it. He says hello.
But I am watching this, and I have there are these moments when I get sad nostalgia, then there's moments when I get pride, and then there's moments where it's like I'm just amazed at the world I have witnessed. But I'm glad I lived through a time when you could just casually drop the name Wolfman Jack.
Yes.
And I start wondering, like, which movie is better for his career, this movie or American Graffiti?
American Graffiti, because he's in it.
Yeah, he's in it.
I know, but this one might be where the real Wolfman Jack fans come from. It's the posers that watched American Graffiti and got on board.
Honestly, like, if you look back at American Graffiti and everything, like, he acted the hell out of that scene.
He really did, man.
He really was good.
It's surprising because
Right?
he's not getting it from the director. You know that's not happening.
And then, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, John Carradine, I found my guy. This is my surrogate. I'm following him through this story. And then, if this movie were a swimming pool, Slim Pickens just cannonballs right into the middle of it. And once Slim Pickens is on the scene, that scene belongs to Mr. Pickens. I mean, you don't work with Kubrick and steal the movie and not steal every other movie you're ever in.
Why does Slim Pickens both look like he is that fat and also stuffing his shirt at the same time? Why does he look like he's doing both? He looks like
I'm like,
is he faking
really
this
funny,
this
Dude,
gut?
He really does look like he's got a fat suit on, but he's also fat.
But it's not
so
like he's
crazy.
it's clearly just him, and you're like, this doesn't make sense.
There was this thing where, like, post World War II, mostly these baby boomer kids, I don't know if it was nutrition, I don't know if it's vaccines and antibiotics, I don't know if it's just freak genetics and all the weak people got killed in the war and only the big people lived, but like clothing companies and the people dressing their children didn't realize humans were getting bigger, but the clothes were staying the same size. Because you watch anything from 1978, even the skinny people have clothes that barely fit. Like fattest, like John Belushi t-shirt barely fits. Also, the skinniest Kevin Bacon t-shirt barely fits. They could not make clothes fit back then on screen, at least.
No,
that's got to be the style, though, right? Like, you got to figure that's probably the style.
I mean, yes, styles do come and go, but they're not cut in a flattering fashion. I genuinely think the clothing industry was really lagging behind the phenotypic changes in adults in the 70s. I really do, because there's just, even, looking at my old, could have been style, sure. But I also think it was just like practicality.
The phenotypic changes. I say it all the time. You know it. You've heard me say it on the weekends.
Phenotypic changes as seen in horror movies.
There's a guy that my friends hang out with. He's a friend of the group, but not my friend. He wears shirts that are like a size too small for him, and every button is screaming. and I'm like, and at one point I had to say something. I was like, man, that top button's gonna kill somebody if you don't unbutton that.
Oh, I always say your buttons are screaming for mercy. Why don't you show them some pity? That's kind of my line.
Spider-Man trying to hold the boat together.
Buddy, that button's holding on for dear life. It's on last threads. All right, so how many castmates do you think found out what Slim was packing?
What are we talking about here?
Man, he was flirting with those girls in a way that wasn't just acting. I think Slim Pickens was good with the ladies. I think that was a time when you could be ugly as heck, but you have a lot of charm and you're a famous star with aspiring starlets, and girls would like you.
Hey, I got some Kubrick stories. I got some Mel Brooks stories. Let me tell you, you're going to have a good time with little Slim.
I think that Slim Pickens probably is in that same wheelhouse that like an elder Shatner is in, where, he's picking on all these, he's like flirting with all these incredibly attractive women, and he's just too old to be threatening. And
yes.
so they're like, oh, this is adorable.
Dirty Grandpa at it again. Look at him.
Yes, I think that's what's happening with Slim Pickens.
Get out of here, you
That's
old
what
scamp.
they used to say about Fatty Arbuckle until one day happened.
Oopsie daisy.
All right. So, but Slim Pickens was that old Hollywood country that wasn't really Southern, because like now any country becomes Southern, like rural equals Southern, even no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
But Slim Pickens was like that old Hollywood, which came from the Westerns. Slim Pickens born and raised in California. You know, like that is not a natural accent. That's kind of like how the mid-Atlantic accent was for radio in the 30s.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of like that Slim Pickens accent is the Western California made up movie cowboy accent. But you kind of miss it because you don't really hear, even people don't try to imitate it. Everybody tries to be either too edgy or too normal.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if Chris Evans just tried to come out and start talking like Slim Pickens?
I'd be all for it.
Listen, I'm not saying he shouldn't try it. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be funny?
I always thought like Slim Pickens and Hoyt Axton should have done a good buddy cop movie. But a body's missing from the morgue in a werewolf movie. We all know that could only mean one thing, right? A very forgetful pathologist.
I love the guy who's playing the morgue attendant and everything. He's great. Just the way that he just flippantly goes through everything, the little walk and talk. Again, for a movie this size and stuff, way cooler than it has to be.
Yeah. And they don't do the thing that where he's eating a sandwich, like he's bored.
Now he does. Now they do have a cutaway to brains and a half-eaten sandwich beside it, but at least
do they really? I didn't see that.
Yeah, you can't. Come on, Joe Dante. It's only because of the editor that we don't have more sandwich in this scene. You know that.
I see.
But there was at least, they were like, okay, brains and then literally like a half-eaten sub.
Man, we get this foggy night scene, and I think it was probably an interior shot, but it's got all this blue light and we got all this low-hanging fog, and it just really feels like all this practical atmospheric effect that makes me think of the original Universal, like the 1941 or whatever year it was, Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman. And then it had me thinking more about like what an art form shooting on film really was too, because you just can't do all that stuff in post. You can't, you actually have to keep track of how many feet of film you're using and stuff that, I don't ever have to think about.
Yeah.
I don't think about that when I whip out my cell phone to get a picture of my dog farting on my cat.
I got to delete these baby pictures. Goodbye.
It's farting, big dog.
Gotta make room for the dog farting.
I know some people, like my kids, would look and think that, oh, that just looks old and cheesy, but I still love it, man. Is it the old guy in me, or is it okay? Is it just that there's like a real art form there to enjoy?
It's the old guy in you, but what's going to end up happening is that your kids are going to get older and they're going to appreciate that the look is so totally, vastly different than what they're capable of making now. That
it's like how stop motion is always going to have its charm.
Yes.
I think some of the wood stuff is actually like practical and everything, and like when you talk about the atmosphere and stuff, just a lot of the smoke and stuff. If you look, and again, right around the same time here and everything, E.T. is what they're doing with E.T. And again, you got the whole Spielberg connection with everything as well. They're lighting up outside California forests really darn well.
Yeah.
And it looks pretty good. They've got it down to where they are lighting it and throwing in just enough smoke and everything to where it is, like you said, Bruce, it also is still at the exact same time very indicative of your Universal horror and stuff like that, where you're smoky graveyards and all that kind of crap and stuff.
And just given the Corman background, I'm looking really close for day for night and any shortcuts, but I'm not seeing a shortcut at all. This to me looks like, I mean, it's not like your most expensive movie of the year or anything like that, but this is a solid, legit studio budget. They intended for this movie to make a splash, and it shows. It's just made right. No shortcuts that I can see. Of course, I'm also no expert. But Mr. Mustache, which I'd never learned this guy's name after watching this movie 3 times, because Mr. Mustache is perfect. Like Mr. Feeney, Mr. Mustache, they've all got their names. But he goes on a suspect wolf hunt that I honestly thought was going to be way worse than it was for him. Like, it turns out not to be that bad, but they got the one guy who's like literally acting like a dog. And they say like he can sniff out the animals. Like, don't you usually take a dog on these hunting trips, is what Mr. Mustache asks. And they're like, no, we got Jethro or whatever his name is over there. The Jungle Boy can sniff him out for us.
I like this guy, the redneck Craven the Hunter, because it's the outfit
why did
he's
I
got
not
on.
think of that name?
He's got
Inbred Craven.
He's got the little the feather or the fur bolo around him and everything. It's perfect.
All I can think is like, man, if they're trying to play like the standard Wolfman mystery of figuring out who the Wolfman is, I think I got it solved.
It might be the guy in the wolf's clothing.
And as I'm pondering who you've so graciously named Redneck Craven, perfect name, that's when we go to this bookstore or whatever, and I realize that Dick Miller is a national treasure. And it's like, man, I am such a fickle lover because I love John Carradine for Slim Pickens. I'm with Slim Pickens hardly a fortnight, and boom, Dick Miller's on the scene. And if there's one thing you know about me, I love Dick Miller.
He is like in most Joe Dante movies that he appears in, which is most of them. He is like an exposition machine, right? He's the guy that you're going to that's going to like tell you what the gremlins are. He's going to tell you what the werewolf is.
He's the second fastest talker, and he's got this way where he's kind of on the same continuum as the cool guy from the 70s Spider-Man movies and a little bit of the Columbo guy. He's got a little bit of that edge to him when he's talking to, where you really think like, man, I know what I'm saying. And I'm saying this with such confidence. I have to be telling you the truth. And he's explaining all this stuff about werewolves, and he's doing it in that Dick Miller, I am confident, straight dope exposition voice. And the guy looks at him and goes, really? He goes, what do I know? I want to sell this crap. You want to buy the book or don't you? And I just love the guy.
He's in that face, just like every line on it tells a million stories. And it's 1981 and he looks like this. It's just, and he lived for a very long time after that, even. Yeah. So it was kind of like so great that we got Dick Miller as long as we did.
And back on the wolf hunt, Mr. Mustache shoots an animal that's not a wolf. And I wonder, like, did he look and think it was a wolf? Like, because he's got a mustache, so I think he's a country boy, but he's acting like he's a vegetarian. He doesn't know the difference between a wolf and a rabbit. And by the way, what the heck do they feed rabbits in Hollywood, man? That rabbit is the size of a golden retriever. And I'm not exaggerating, am I?
That was a rabbit from a pet store, 1,000%. Because
yeah, or like a well-loved rabbit. I mean, yeah.
I'm thinking that was like a trained rabbit that knew how to play dead, because nobody's going to kill a specimen that beautiful. You know what I mean?
But he looks at it and he just goes, what do you do with this? What do you mean, what do you do with it?
Why just shoot it? Like, some questions you should ask before you pull the trigger, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Adam kills rabbits without any remorse, doesn't he?
I love them. Love them to death. That's their problem.
But we do get our first werewolf attack, and it really kind of straddles the line between Universal monster movies and modern horror when we get that attack out there. I like it. You know, it's giving us a little bit of both. So no matter what you're in the mood for, I think we're hinting at it with the first attack before it really continues to meld them both, I think, quite well.
We eventually get there. I mean, it's like, honestly, that's one of the biggest things. I mean, I know what they're doing with it, but it takes far too long to get to, really interesting things. And I think that's what I remember back, upon the second time going, I remember why I didn't like this as much, because it takes forever to get to where it needs to go.
Guys, he gets attacked by a wolf. He gets bitten by a wolf. They don't think it's a werewolf, because he doesn't know the difference in a rabbit and a wolf. So of course he doesn't know the difference in a werewolf and a wolf. And he goes and he tells D. Wallace he's been bitten by a wolf. Got a Band-Aid on his shoulder, with a weird place for a wolf bite, a really weird way to treat it. So what does she do? She gets on the phone, calls her friend in LA and says, why don't you come here, because my husband was bitten by a wolf. Now, my wife did not watch this movie with me, but if she had, I would have looked at her and said, sweetheart, if we're ever camping and I'm bitten by a wolf, don't call your sister and ask her to come to the campsite. Take me to the city and put me in a hospital or something. I don't understand what she thought the benefit of having her sister there was going to be in the situation.
She's really good at support,
I mean, your friends ever call you in the middle of their psychotherapy camping trips and ask you to join them? Would you go if they did?
No, I don't think I would.
I kind of think that you would, Sean.
I would call somebody.
Like, you would go check on them. I don't think you would stay the week like her friend does, but I think you might go make sure they were okay.
You got to go in that room where they're supervised.
It depends on the situation.
Depends on the friend, not the situation. Let's be honest. There's some friends like, fingers crossed, it's a werewolf party. I guess they're not really friends, are they? But could you imagine going on a picnic with absolutely no veggies? Because this movie's about to take a turn and it pivots on vegetables at a picnic.
So weird, but
I
soothing
don't know
enough
where
for
to
this
unpack
movie.
the weirdness. First off, I'm assuming that the script had the boyfriend written as a vegetarian from the beginning because it's LA and it's 1981 and a vegetarian is a freaky weird thing then.
It's also, I mean, it's a neat character trait for 1981, right? Like it's
But
unusual, but enough
you don't
people do it at that point.
you don't you don't cast a guy that clearly smokes 7 packs a day to be a vegetarian, right?
Yeah, he does not look like a vegetarian to be
He
sure.
he definitely does not. But I mean, I think it's one of those things where like it's part of the script, like it's a neat tell later,
Well, it's right
the
here.
vegetarian thing.
Yeah, right here's where it plays into the plot. And I think that the casting director may not have known they were casting a vegetarian. That's all. But here's the point. Have you guys ever been on a picnic? I assume you have. I've been on not as many picnics as you'd think, considering how old I am, but I've been on a few. And there's always been at least one non-meat item in the picnic basket. Like, have you ever gone on a picnic and it was nothing but like ham, like no bread, just ham, fried chicken, maybe some meatballs?
I tell you what, you're describing a pretty good camping trip right here, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, anyway, they got no vegetables and they're apologizing because they only brought meat to the picnic, which, come on, man, at least some potato chips or something, right?
Yeah, you think.
A little potato salad. I don't like potato salad, but I'm not a vegetarian. Vegetarian, you got to take what you can get, right? Well, anyway, he's like, it's okay. I guess I'm hungry enough. I'll eat anything. As he gnaws on what I'm pretty sure was a whole like ham hock or something. It's bigger than a chicken leg is all I'm going to say. Like I've eaten a lot of drumsticks. He's gnawing on maybe it was a rib.
You look like a rib to me.
Yeah. And it's like, when your vegetarian husband starts eating meat, that means he's a werewolf. There's no two ways around it, right?
Yeah. It's an old adage for a reason.
Actually, if any married ladies out there are married to vegetarians and then one day your husband is eating meat, it can only mean one thing, and that is that he cheated on you with a werewolf fortune teller.
Which happens.
Call a divorce lawyer if that happens.
I like to think that this is because he gets with that lady on account of like Dee Wallace was just like she was so traumatized before and everything, and he was just like, "Come on, baby, let's get some." And she's like, "No, thank you." And he's like, "Well, if I can't get some from you, I'm going out to get some from the crazy vampire lady at the beach."
Has that happened already?
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at is while all that's going on. He's like, and this is where I made a note that says sexy vampires kind of makes sense to me, like it's there with Bram Stoker's Dracula. But sexy werewolves never did. But I feel like this movie really tried to make sexy werewolves a thing.
So the werewolf, the full frontal nudity werewolf sex scene has happened already, or no?
It's kind of happening right as we speak.
Because this is there's a couple of things, right?
Let's hear it.
So one is that I really like the writing here. I like the picnic. I like that like there's clearly something wrong with this guy now with her husband. Like it's a nice show don't tell piece of writing. Like there's not Dick Wolf like hidden in a bush, where he jumps up and he goes, well, clearly now he's a werewolf. Like they don't do any of that. And I think
if Dick Miller jumped out of a bush during this scene, it's a totally different kind of movie.
And I really like I really like this part of the writing. Like you can't help the late 70s, early 80s pacing of this movie because they don't have the money. Yeah. So it's gonna be a little slow in parts. And so that they do a really nice job with the script on this. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, wow, that's really great. And then they completely and utterly betray the movie special effects unit by animating the two wolves having sex. It's literally an animation. It is a cartoon. They screw so good those two turn into cartoons.
Well, I'll have to take their word for it. I've never been that good at it. But I wonder, kids who have grown up, there are people getting like almost 40 that don't really remember a post-pubescent time without the internet. Yeah. And I wonder if they look back at these movies and just think we were all really, really perverted back then, and they don't understand, like, man, if you weren't going to buy under-the-counter magazines and you were solely relying on R-rated movies, You needed more, the adult men back then, I guess, needed a little more nipplage than we do nowadays. A little more chowdery buckety.
Yeah, Sears' catalog used to just be good enough, didn't it?
You know what? That's a great dinger zone for a day I'm out.
Yeah, me too. Maybe it's just Adam speaking.
Well, let me regale you, ladies and gentlemen, with the stories of yore.
But we do kind of get a good look at the wolf, a little bit more of a good look at the wolf during the love scene before they go animated. I really did like the hands and the nails on the fingernails on the hands or the claws. I just thought it looked good. Nice. I'm a sucker for practical effects, and I like it when I can still see the costume shop in the movie.
No, they built all of these for sure.
And a lot of these exterior scenes look like the Pacific Northwest to me. So did they... I don't have no idea if the documentary covered it, but they could not have filmed this terribly close to LA. At the very least, they're like up at the Muir Woods, right?
I don't remember seeing anything about it. They're in a state park at one point, I remember.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, like the Muir Wood or something. But they may have gone
Russian
all the way up
Gulch State Park.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Mm-hmm.
So it did look a lot like the Pacific Northwest. It made me wonder if this movie inspired Twilight, because who knows, anything's possible. But there's this Terry lady, the one who her friend called, said, my husband was bitten by a wolf and he started cheating on me and he ate me. Well, she's walking out in the woods looking for something, and she finds this creepy old cabin in the woods, and she does what any sane person would do, and she breaks and enters into a creepy old cabin in the woods where it doesn't go so well for her. We get a nice werewolf killing there.
When is ever that gone bad? Let me just break into this house that seems abandoned and all. No, come on now.
And I felt a little bit like when they were in that house and stuff, like there were some things going on that seemed like they were kind of going for a little bit of Texas Chainsaw level slasher, but they just didn't want to commit because, of course, they don't want to get that X rating and not be able to be shown in legit theaters because it's a big budget thing. But I do feel like the influence of all these things, it's like transforming horror. I mean, this was such a transformative time in horror, at least for people mining Sean's age.
Yeah, this feels a little more, it feels like there's a little more money involved, right? Because you get Halloween and what is that, 79?
Yeah,
and then
super low budget Halloween, super low budget Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this is where they're trying to bring it to the masses, I think.
And then because Friday the 13th makes so much, it's like a ridiculous amount of money for return on investment, right? And that's really when the floodgates open because of how much money Friday the 13th made. I want to say that's true. I don't know if that's entirely true.
I think it's fairly fair assessment.
But this movie is the first one because the first Friday the 13th has to be like right around $1 million. Like they're not making that one for a ton of money.
Yeah.
But then they're like, okay, let's add a little more money. And that's where we are right now. It feels like this is the first of those movies where it's like, people want new horror movies. Let's put a little bit of money into something and see what happens. And, this movie is huge.
Kind of like an Armageddon Deep Impact sort of scenario here, too, because we're getting dueling werewolf movies at about the same time with big budgets that seem to have come up spontaneously and independent of one another.
Well, Landis had it on the board. This is the way that the documentary says it, is that Landis had it on the board that American Werewolf in London. Like it was one of the things he wanted to make, and it was up there forever. And it's why we got into that disagreement at the beginning of the show, is because he had Rick Baker on the hook for that show. And the second that Landis hears that there's a movie called The Howling being made and they want Rick Baker, it immediately goes to the top of the board and Rick Baker has to go do that show.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, in the part that I got wrong and that you corrected me over text, thank you, is that it was not, it's not Tom Savini, it's Bottin.
Yes, Savini's pretty firmly hitched to Romero for his
right. And so this is Bottin's first job by himself. Like there's no Rick Baker at all.
And the fan in me, the werewolf movie fan in me, says that Rick Baker basically did both movies because he had a good relationship with Bottin here, so he's on the phone with him. They've got the same plans. They've already discussed it. And, as we'll talk about next week, and we're going to go ahead and talk about the transformation this week. These are two transformations that are always on top 10 lists of best werewolf transformations of all time. They're kind of the same transformation because what revolutionized the werewolf transformation effect here was the air bladders.
Right.
And it was Rick Baker's idea to do that with the air bladders. And he had already kind of discussed the rough idea of how he pictured the werewolf transformation with Boteen, and they had a great working relationship. And for them, it wasn't considered competition. They both wanted the best movie so that maybe they could get more work,
Yeah, Landis actually wanted to do American Werewolf in London right after Schlock.
Wow, really?
That's how long ago that he actually wanted to do that. But like,
wow,
even then, Baker was just like, I don't know if I can do all of this. But you can, like in his Metamorphosis book, you can see a lot of his drawings and stuff like that for all of the things. It's pretty cool.
This was also because practical effects were your only real option for horror movies. They were only real option for any kind of movie for a long time, limited non-practical effects.
Yeah.
And because of that, in the rise in horror and slashers, we've been talking about Tom Savini, Rick Baker. We're talking about Rob Bottin. It's also when Stan Winston started coming into his own. Mm-hmm. There's just like you could actually make a Hall of Fame for special effects directors in this era. I honestly don't know the names of any now, and that's probably got as much to do with me as it does with the state of affairs. But it was a real golden age for being a celebrity effects guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the houses. Like now effects studios are houses. It's not one guy's name.
Like K&B is about probably the last big one that anybody would know right off the dome.
And now I think people are talking about things like Weta and ILM, and it's it's effects houses, but it's not that kind of cool in your backyard what you did as a kid and you thought was awesome and wanted to do it when you grow up.
Yeah, like I said, I think K&B is like the premier, effects one that everybody would go to and everything. All of you are just like, oh, well, Greg Nicotero is just the guy that you do for all that stuff these days. Which is,
you know what, Greg Nicotero is probably the modern. Yep, that's it. You nailed it. He just became a director briefly and was not so good at that. So I forgot how awesome he is at the other stuff. And when I say he's not so good at that, it's relatively speaking. I don't mean, obviously, grand scheme of things, better than most people. But we do get the werewolves here, and I just kind of wanted to ask you guys how you feel about bipedal versus quadrupedal werewolves, because we're going to get a little bit of the quadrupedal in the next movie we watch, but it's exclusively bipedal here. I've always been partial to what I call the wolf man, which is the bipedal anthropomorphized wolf, not the man turns into a vicious large werewolf, kind of like how they do in Underworld.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like, I kind of like the bipedal werewolf a little bit more, at least in concept and idea and everything.
Like the Twilight werewolves are my least favorite of all, where they are just purely oversized wolves.
Yeah, no thank you to that.
My favorite are the kind that ride on the top of vans and play basketball.
That's in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. One of my 7 scariest movies. You know how frightened I was when I saw that guy on top of a van?
I always wanted to do that.
But we have one of the greatest lines of cinema that I wish I knew was in this, because I would have teased you guys with it for a solid week. But a guy looks at another guy and he says, "Hey, not all of us have enough money for a Mazda."
That's true.
I love
that is the best
so
line.
Much.
That is the best line.
You fancy Mazda. In 1981, a Mazda was a fancy car, everybody.
It's an RX-7, right? Am I right?
I don't know, man.
It looks like an RX-7.
Probably.
Yeah, I knew that my dad said, don't drive anything with a Wankel engine. So I never drove a Mazda. But I don't know why he said that, because I don't know what a Wankel engine is, but it's a funny word. Anyway, so that's when, one time I was at the mall. And this guy was coming out of the mall. This is like 2000, 2001, way back. And there's a Maserati parked out in the parking lot. And the guy's like, strutting towards his Maserati. He opens the door. He's getting ready to get in. I go, "Hey, is that a Maz?" And he goes, "Yes," before I can finish it. And I go, "Duh." And I said, "I thought it was a Mazda." And I walked away while he's trying to correct me. I miss those days.
What are you talking about? That feels like you would have done that last week.
Yeah, it really does feel
I haven't seen any Maseratis in years.
How many Mazdas?
Now, be honest.
I'm going to guess less.
Hey, you're probably right. Did you expect a whole pack of wolves?
Datsun.
That's one thing that I did not remember was like all of the werewolves in this and how we had so many of them that I was like, oh wow, I'd totally forgotten about all that.
I just could not believe that Slim Pickens was in on it.
Well,
like, that's the one that really got me the most, because I did not realize, but it makes sense that they're all wolves. We get it all out. And I think making the werewolves like a coven and like an actual pack might have been something kind of landmark, that this was probably the first movie to show them as pack animals.
That is one of the things they say in the documentary, is that they wanted to explore that idea. They like that idea. But they kept using the term spa, which it was just very, very strange to me. They're like, it's like a werewolf spa and blah, blah. And I was like, I think that the word spa has changed meanings from the time of them making this documentary to me watching it right now. Yes.
Yeah. I know there was a point in time in the late 80s when spa specifically meant a jacuzzi, and people called it a spa.
Well, and it was also just a place that you worked out, lest we forget the 1988 classic Death Spa.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, as the whole family of werewolves confront Dee Wallace here, I start calling her Rosemary, because this shows, I think, a pretty heavy Rosemary's Baby influence. The realization that even like the nice old man is in on it, kind of like how the nice old ladies were in the coven and all that. And of course, I recently read a nonfiction book that's about horror movie history, and it kind of makes a pretty good argument that Rosemary's Baby was the first modern horror movie. And nothing symbolizes it better than when the producers took it away from Castle and gave it to that Polanski guy.
Listen, I mean, the first modern horror film, you really got to. I think we're going to count Psycho for that one, but that's just
that's
where we're taking out of the gothic thing and putting it into the quote unquote modern real world.
It's kind of like, what do you call modern? Because they almost say Psycho is like Silver Age versus Bronze. You know what I mean? Like, it's not Golden Age, but it's not modern.
Fair enough.
Because the modern stuff now that we're getting elevated horror, we're kind of coming back around to Hitchcock. But Hitchcock was the first one to say, oh, this can be artistic and not just fun.
Yeah.
But we have Eddie with this mangled human form. Eddie Quist, the guy who is the serial killer at the heart of it all, the mysterious werewolf in Los Angeles who left the spa and went out and started hunting amongst the wild ones. But we do see that really, really nice makeup on him. Again, I'm loving that makeup where you can see the jawbone and his face is blasted off. And they're not even, it's not like harshly litten. Litten's not a word. Lit. No. It's not harshly lit, but they're also not trying to hide anything either. And I really like that makeup on it.
It's really good. I did not realize,
more horrific than the werewolf.
I didn't even realize that was Robert Picardo until like the end. I was like, holy crap. He is like, usually you can spot him a mile away and stuff, because he's got a very interesting and, unique look to him and stuff. And the bald head.
And a great voice, too. That voice is.
Oh, his voice is awesome. And he doesn't sound like himself in this one either, which, again, is really, really great.
Because he's probably like 19 when they made this movie.
That's probably true.
Another movie that many people point to as the birth of modern horror, of course, is Night of the Living Dead. Very strong Night of the Living Dead influence. I think the way that the werewolves are trapped in the barn and the barn is burned and they're all kind of clamoring together at the doors like zombies. Very reminiscent to me of Romero.
Oh, it's like the reverse. Instead of all of them outside the house trying to get in, they're all inside the house trying to get out, and it's on fire. It's pretty cool.
And a move that I would see. What's the name of the guy that directed the Darabont? I've seen Darabont use that in the season he directed of Walking Dead too, where he kind of reversed it and it felt a lot like this. And I don't know if there's much more to say. I mean, we're pretty much at the end of the movie here, so we got to talk about the end. And the only way I know how to talk about the end of The Howling is to say, what in the name of Muppet Babies was that Ewok Wookiee thing on screen?
I've got an answer for you.
Let's hear it.
So the two things that Dee Wallace has in her contract when she signs on to do this movie: one, no nudity. And they really, really tried to get her to take her clothes off. And
I could imagine that the director said, I thought you meant I couldn't be nude, not you.
It's 1981, and that's what sells. Come on now.
And so what basically what ends up happening is that they try to set her up to where, like, there's a barn and everybody's naked in the barn, and she shows up to set and no one has told her that everyone's naked in the barn. So she walks in and she's like, and she knows what's coming up. Like, she knows they're about to ask her. And she's like, no, absolutely not. And so she goes back to her trailer. They literally bring out somebody from the studio out to where they're shooting. And the guy gets out of his car, walks into the location, into the set, and says, she doesn't take her clothes off, walks back in, drives away. Like literally one of the heads of the studio does that. It's awesome. So that's one part. The second part is that she does not turn into a werewolf at the end of the movie, or she doesn't turn into a werewolf. And so this is the big argument. And they don't really get into it in the documentary. This is me reading between the lines, is that there was clearly argument after argument after argument of you've got to be a werewolf by the end of the movie. It's the whole movie.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole point, is exposing the reality to the world. It's very Lovecraftian in that the real horror isn't in what you see, but the realization that the world isn't what you thought it was. And so
the argument settles on, okay, I'm not going to be a real werewolf. I'm going to be like a type of werewolf that isn't the same. So like, it's like a dog creature more than a werewolf, and that's what they land on, and that's how they get to this scene.
Yeah, it does look like a Pekingese or a Yorkie or something. You're right.
Yeah.
Kooky eyeballs, though.
Lady Chewbacca, a sexy Lady Chewbacca.
Oh, you remember that? You remember that outtake song that the Beatles did, Lady Chewbacca? You remember that song? It's a good one.
Lady Chewbacca.
I was on the cutting room floor. You had to get the special edition album for that one.
Strangely, 12 years before the release of Star Wars.
Oddly enough. Well, before we get to our final review, we have to find out how this werewolf classic relates back 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone.
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement.
Oh.
What up, Stallone? Robert Picardo plays the werewolf Eddie, and he gets shot multiple times, acid thrown in his face, and then burned alive. But unfortunately for Robert Picardo, things only get worse from there. He would go on to star in the 1994 movie Revenge of the Nerds 4, Nerds in Love, where a shocking amount of actors from the original Revenge of the Nerds return. No joke. There's 8 actors reprising their roles from the original in this one.
Wow.
He would then go on to a movie called Mega Shark versus Crocosaurus, where he played the role of Admiral Calvin. For those of you listening in the future, there was a movie called Sharknado that did so well that producers kept making knockoffs of an already terrible movie. And they all thought as long as it had a shark in it, idiots would watch. They were everywhere during the 2010s. But let's go back to one. Before Robert Picardo started as Eddie in The Howling, he was on an episode of Kojak, a show that also guest starred you, Mr. Sylvester Stallone. I've spoken about Kojak many times before, so I won't bore you with the details here. The reason why I chose Robert Picardo for this week's Stallone connection is because he also had a 3-episode stint on a 1997 cartoon called The Blues Brothers Animated Series.
Oh,
I swear to you, Mr. Stallone,
vaguely remember.
This was a real thing. I had never heard of this project as someone who was a recovering Blues Brothers fan from when I was a child. This is something I absolutely would have hate watched, because no one, and I mean no one, wanted a Blues Brothers cartoon, and definitely no one in 1997 wanted one. Where was the audience for this? John Belushi had been dead for 15 years when this show for small children was pitched. And yet, against all odds, it was produced by the UPN network, where they ordered 12 episodes.
You know, Dan Aykroyd had to throw his Hollywood weight around to where people just were like, okay, we're just going to have to do it and show him that nobody is going to watch it.
Who needs 6 hours of a Blues Brothers cartoon? UPN ended up only producing 8 when someone finally said out loud at the UPN network, why the hell are we making a Blues Brothers animated series in 1997? And it was canceled before an episode ever aired. 3 episodes were shown at a festival, and things did not go well. At the time of me writing this, all fully produced episodes have been lost, with only animatics resurfacing a few years ago, which makes this series one of my new favorite hobby horses, lost media. Also, the parts of Jake and Elwood Blues were voiced by Peter Aykroyd and James Belushi.
Oh,
Because why bother with the talent, charisma, and chemistry of the original Blues Brothers when you can hire their brothers who have absolutely no history together?
Once again, I feel like Dan Aykroyd made them do this whole thing.
And there you have it, Mr. Stallone. This week's Stallone connection is Robert Picardo. Yes, I know he's in Star Trek and Gremlins 2 and Inner Space, but I wanted to talk about the Blues Brothers animated series, damn it. Hope to hear from you soon. Your pal, Sweet Chauncey from the internet.
God, I
I think that could have been a show all on its own. I don't think we need the movie review. That was a great Stallone connection.
Yeah. Well, here at HMP, we have our own patented Robin rating system. Bruce, where does The Howling fall in the Robin's rating system for you?
It understands what came before it. It helps lay down a little bit of a pathway for some things that come after it. Very historically significant, yet I think still a fun watch. A lot of it's carried by Slim Pickens and Dick Miller. Wish they were both in it a whole lot more. Still, I couldn't imagine anybody not enjoying watching this around the time of Halloween. So I'm giving this a Dick Miller Grayson.
Sean?
Yeah, I like this movie. This is one of my favorite werewolf movies for sure. It's probably like a low Tim Drake. It's slow. Boy, when it's slow, it's really slow. It's got that late 70s, early 80s pace. But there's so much to recommend it, and there's so many times. Like we didn't even mention one of my favorite actors, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy is in this movie, playing the owner of the news station, and he's the guy who's also weirdly the owner of the news station in UHF, the Weird Al Yankovic movie.
He always looks like he could be like Stacy Keach's brother or something.
Oh yeah,
he's such a great character actor, and I know that Joe Dante uses him in everything, and so to see this face that you haven't seen in a very long time, it's a low Tim Drake for me.
Yeah, there are parts. If you would have asked me before today when I watched this, what my guess for my rating of The Howling would be based upon the previous time seeing it, I think I probably would have said, probably like a Stephanie Brown, to be quite honest with you, because I and we'll talk about it next week. But I wasn't super hype on this, and like you said, watching it again, seeing that first half there and everything, it takes forever for this thing to get going. And I know they're trying to do something a little bit different here, but boy, you want some werewolf in your werewolf movie, and you got to wait till about 40 minutes into your hour and a half film to get there, and it's a little bit of a slog sometimes. But again, I like a lot of the authenticity of stuff, how everything just. They shot in all these places. They didn't build these sets or anything like that. They went to these, the news station. They went to the bookstore and all that kind of crap. And it looks great. It looks great. And it's just, Joe Dante is one of those guys. Like, he never got up to that, like, quite Spielberg level or anything like that. But boy, he was just a workhorse guy that you knew could, put out a quality product that was always going to be at least pretty darn watchable.
Adam, who do you think has made more money directing? Do you think Joe Dante or Dennis Dugan?
Maybe Dante. I mean, the Gremlins flicks made a lot of money.
Yeah, Gremlins made so much money. Although
I don't know if you're asking, did the movie make money or did the director get paid a lot of money? Because I mean overall through career,
which director made more money, because I mean, you're not going to beat Gremlins. Like that first Gremlins movie just made all the money in the world and still continues to do so.
And I know when he wanted to do Gremlins 2, they kind of were like, oh, please, for the love of God.
Yeah, he had
back.
him over a barrel. It's why we got the Gremlins 2 that we got.
That's as wacky as it is. So it feels like, you know,
great.
he had enough power and stuff over the time, and I'm sure he gets enough residuals from things based upon things like that, where he probably went, listen, y'all gonna put me in for something on, you know, the back end of some of this. I don't know, but this is just me talking to my butt. But I would think that he would have that kind of, at least a little bit more clout.
The only reason why I'm asking is because when you see what Joe Dante has done in the last, 20 years, it's all TV.
It's all TV stuff. A lot of
he's an older fella. I mean, maybe he don't want to commit to long shooting schedule. You know, TV, you can show up and do an episode probably in a week, and you're out of there.
Well, one of the nice things that he is doing is that you just go on YouTube there and look at trailers from Hell, and like that's his big kind of foray and everything cool. Of having all of these, great famous directors and stuff come in and talk about the trailers for famous movies that they enjoy and stuff, and so. He's just been one of those guys that's always been around, and like whatever he does, I'll take a peek. So that'll do it for the first episode of. I almost forgot. I even put a little drop together, I think. Yeah, see, if any more than that, we'll get copyright strike. So that's just as quick as I got. And I put it towards the end of the episode. That way YouTube won't, That's what I'm told. That's what I'm told. I don't know if we'll find out, won't we? But next week, Bruce, what are we going to be popping on to?
We're going to go on to American Werewolf in London, because it's just the perfect movie to discuss in the context of Howling.
Right. I mean, because honestly, like both 1981 films, it is the volcano versus Dante's Peak that we would get.
And then I'm going to follow that up. I'm going to follow that up with Wolfen, because these three werewolf movies among werewolf fans are talked about comparatively. And of course, Wolfen, the one that's talked about less amongst the general public. So I'm curious. I haven't seen it forever, so I'll be curious to see what I think of it. And then taking a kind of a nod from Sean, where he wanted to close strong at the end of the month, I'm hoping to close with Teen Wolf, so everybody knows what we got ahead of us.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because American Werewolf in London certainly right up there. I've never actually seen Wolfen, so this will be a first one for me. Even that was for whatever reason that was. You're right. It was in that also ran kind of category for so long. So it was just like, listen, I've seen the best ones. Why do I need to go see this third rate one? But we'll find out all that later as things go on. In the meantime, Sean, where can we find more of our stuff on the internet?
We have got another show called Ahsoka 30 Questions, and please listen to that and watch the TV show Ahsoka so you can understand the questions.
Yeah, otherwise you'll be very, very lost. But we say that, but we had people that listened to those 30 question shows that did not watch the shows.
It's true.
So I'm like, you guys are amazing. I don't know how in the world. I'll just listen to the recap show with these jerks. Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for the downloads. And of course, join us back here next week, everybody, when we're keeping on Once Bitten once again with American Werewolf in London. For Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portress. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.